turn on your mechanical translator.
Sure, of course. I've got them right here.
My guess is, sir, that they use microwaves for what you might call person-to-person conversation.
The basic idea is that there's a groove that I can follow that's exactly right for me to live in an optimum way.
Truth.
And soul!
Truth and Soul Incorporated, the New Zealand Advertising Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the third podcast from Truth and Soul Incorporated, the New Zealand Advertising Podcast. Today we break the habit of a lifetime and take the unusual step for a credit-based podcast of listening to a client. But not just any old client. Mike Watson, previously Marketing Director of Sky, was the checkbook behind some wonderful work over the years. In fact, I reckon his name was on more award-winning work than any other single client in New Zealand. I thought it important to include clients within the creative community, as you'll always find that when great work is produced, there is a great client behind it. Today's disclaimer, as you may have picked up, we like to get our apologies in before we actually make mistakes. But when we talk about an individual hitting a lion, I'm referring to slapping it with an open palm on its buttocks. Illegal for a small child, but unlikely to do much damage to the 200-kilo killing machine. We draw the line at maiming lions for this podcast.
You're listening to Truth
And Soul.
the New Zealand Advertising Podcast.
So, dear listener, today I'm talking to Mike Watson of Sky, because...
X of Sky to be...
So, beg your pardon,
X of
yeah,
Sky.
X of Sky. And Mike was the marketing director, was that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for about 140 years.
140 years, from 2000 to 2018.
Crikey.
Yes.
18 years, nearly 20 years. And I believe, I have a theory that no one has yet contradicted. If anyone who's listening to this podcast, feel free to contradict and send in. But I have a theory that Mike is probably the single most awarded client in New Zealand advertising history in terms of creative awards, which I think gives him a really key role in the strength of New Zealand advertising over those years. Obviously, with Mike no longer at Sky and me down to part-time, the industry is on its last legs. But I thought it'd be interesting to sit Mike down and get the point of view of clients of what makes good ads, why on earth he does it, all that kind of stuff. So we'll start, Michael, please.
Yes.
And bear in mind, whilst we're old muckers,
Yes.
we haven't worked together for like 13 years.
That's right.
That's right saying. That's when Sky started going downhill. Is that?
Yeah, but about there.
Yeah, back then. Yeah. So, Mike, how did you end up as marketing director of Sky?
Well, first of all, thank you for that lovely introduction. I think it's probably fair to say...
So I'll edit that out later more point.
Yes. I think it's fair to say that there is a big advantage in working in the TV industry in terms of being awarded for creative. If you look at the creative awards, TV companies tend to do very well. TVNZ have done very well. MediaWorks have done well. But, that's just to make that point.
That's very fair. Not as well.
Not as well, but TV over-indexes a little bit in terms of...
Correct, because people like TV. And
people like the TV. There's already a lot of creativity gone into the content, particularly, movie content and drama content. If you're allowed to do an advert for Game of Thrones, I would hope you can produce something that would at least get some kind of bronze at Axis.
That's a fair point. It's a lot harder to do something for Piles Cream or something. Yeah,
indeed. Well, I kind of, and it's interesting when I've told people this story, often they go, it's interesting. That's how I got into this industry as well. Kind of stumbled my way into it. I was arrived here from the UK in the 90s. I went to get a job at Sky TV. I was literally knocking on doors, selling Sky TV door to door, and then kind of climbed my way up the pole a little bit. And I was running the call center. And my ex-boss, Nate Smith, came in with a magazine and showed me an ad for Gordon's Gin. He said, well, what? And he said to me, why do I like that advert? I said, it's probably the production values. Oh, yeah. he wandered off. And then anyway, 6 months later, he walked in and said, you're the marketing director. You seem to know a bit about that stuff. And that was literally how I got the job. Completely unqualified.
That's been obvious to me over the years. But yeah.
Yes, indeed. And kind of stumbled my way into it that way. So, and actually, Damon from
Stapleton.
DDB Stapleton was telling me a similar story, how he made a joke about napalm or something to his boss in South Africa, and he said, "You're the kind of guy we need." And just a little snippet of conversation turned into something great for me.
I always dreamt that was going to happen to me, but it never did. Nobody.
You probably went to, you probably got qualified and everything. So.
Well, I had to, because nobody liked my little quips or my breakdown of Gordon's. So it's very interesting that one of the most successful marketers in New Zealand over the last 20 years has got no formal training whatsoever.
None at all.
Doesn't really know what he's doing.
Not really.
Completely wings it, and yet wings it in a very good direction. Now, this plays into the hands of Gary Vee, who you may or may not have heard of, but he's a guy who says that all marketing education is a waste of time. But Mark Ritson, of course, on the other side, would say that that's disgraceful, and you need to have done marketing.
Well, I don't know Mr. V too well. Mark Ritson, I'm a big fan of Mark Ritson.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think he'd be equally interesting if he had no formal qualifications on marketing. I mean, most of it's common sense. If even the stuff he says is mostly common sense, and he looks at work, looks at trends. This kind of slobbering love affair that people have with digital over TV and the like, that seems to me to be common sense. It probably gives him a certain credence that he wouldn't otherwise have when he's turning up to talk to packed venues. But
I common sense, yes, but somebody has to put that common sense into you. So you go, okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. That makes sense.
Yeah, but I think there are some kind of fundamentals you need to understand about human nature that will lead you on the right path about making good marketing decisions. I mean, humans have been. We're going to get very deep very quickly, but I mean, humans haven't changed in 10,000 years, and marketing was only invented as a discipline, 100 years ago. So I don't know, make something of that. Yes,
no, that's true, and I hope you wouldn't bring the 10,000 year thing up. There's a couple of old dinosaurs sitting here, but you've knocked the head off that spot, so to speak.
So anyway, so that's how I got into it. And look, there's no doubt I learned on the job. Absolutely. I mean, I can remember the first advert I approved. We've got all day, so I can ramble on, can't I?
Edit this out, Jonathan.
At the time, we at Sky had this strange mix of the Discovery Channel and the horse racing channel because we were desperate for bandwidth, and we went to the TAB and said, when there's no racing on, can we rent your space?
We've got education so that school kids can get into gambling.
So we had this kind of weird David Attenborough followed by the 2:30
Uttoxeter. Yeah.
And so anyway, the decision was made to split those out. That wasn't working quite so well. And I wanted a campaign to make that point that these things didn't mix so well, so we've changed them. And I remember seeing a few concepts, and it's not really working for me. Can we get something a bit more punchy, a bit more
what a great feedback. Edgier, yeah.
And so I think it was Janelle at the time.
Janelle Rohrbeck
came up with the concept of Osama bin Laden using rosary beads. And which was tick the box for edgy. See, that's more like that kind of thing. That's the kind of thing, a bit more,
Yeah.
Anyway, about on the morning of print, Martin O'Halloran rang me. For our listener who doesn't know Martin O'Halloran, think of kind of Carson from Downton Abbey. He's that kind of figure, a modern version.
I don't watch Downton Abbey, Mike. I'm too young. But
yes. Well. Yeah. So he rang me in something of a the butler, yeah. He rang me in a kind of blind panic and said, I've just seen this thing is kind of print. I've cancelled everything, Mike. I'm sorry. I've had I want to talk to you as quickly as possible. You know, he was literally worried about having a fatwa issued against us.
Yeah.
So
the agency CEO, well, I think Marty
was the CEO.
He was probably the MD at the time. I think.
He was the MD. He was the MD. Yeah.
MD was more worried about the ads than the client.
He was more worried about the ads than the client. Well, and in fairness to him, he was 100% right.
Yeah.
And I was 100% wrong. The reason I tell that story is to illustrate the point that the faith that was shown in me to do the job. I mean, the first couple of years, I was absolutely winging it. And so, circling back to the point about Ritson, could I have done with 2 years at university studying marketing? Wouldn't have done me any harm, that's for sure. But I don't think it precludes a great career in marketing for anybody, because there are some technical things you need to pick up on, no doubt about that. You know, understanding the industry, but there is still some intuitive common sense.
Yeah, that you were lacking.
So circling back to your point about what was his name, it wasn't Bobby V, it was
Gary V.
50s.
Gary V, yeah.
Gary V and Ritson. There's probably
Marketing
somewhere in the
education.
middle where you can, where would be the ideal, but I don't think either route precludes you. There are some hugely qualified people who are completely paralyzed by their education.
Yes.
And some people on the other end of the spectrum who don't know shit from dates.
Was you paralysed by incompetence? More?
Paralyzed by incompetence completely.
It's great. It gives me a chance to get my own back on you after those.
So,
okay, getting back to me.
Yeah, getting back to you.
So I came over in 2000.
Yes.
And one of the first briefs I had was with Pete Thompson.
Yeah.
Who is celebrated his 143rd birthday last week.
Happy birthday.
Hi, Pete. I don't think you listen to podcasts, but with Pete Thompson, and we were asked to do a couple of TV ads for Sky.
Yeah.
And I thought, brilliant. As you say, TV, that's more interesting than Piles Cream. So Pete and I sat down with...
A great tagline, that.
Yes. More interesting than Piles Cream. We'll try and sell it into your...
New Man.
New Man. So we wrote these scripts, and I remember Kath Watson, who was head of OMD, we had a group meeting, and we said, right, we've got these scripts ready for Sky. And Kath laughed at the scripts and went, well, of course, they'll never buy them.
Yeah.
And I was fresh off the boat from the UK, and I'm like, well, what do you mean? That's not the attitude. And then she goes, oh, they might. There's a new marketing director in. So we went down, and next thing I know, we're making those ads. So do you remember that?
I obviously remember it very vividly because, I mean, we'll talk about that whole campaign maybe a little bit more, but I mean, those ads were the start of an exponential growth in Sky TV. Now there's causation and correlation and all that, and you can get far too scientific about it. But, I think what those ads did.
Sorry, just for the listener, this is the ad. I don't know if we can put them on the website. I don't know if we have the technology.
They're on YouTube, I think.
They're on YouTube. One is called Scoreless, I think. It was the guy trying not to find out the score for the rugby, and he found it on a newspaper by mistake. And the other one was the Mark and Marty, the big guy and the little guy, booking a motel room to watch the rugby, and the chambermaid comes round and thinks that they're for gay sex, which was quite reasonable
back in
presumption. Yeah.
Probably couldn't run that ad now, actually.
Well, we'll get onto the bestiality later.
And interrupting myself, I made a note of the funniest ad that we didn't make on that campaign, which we'll come to later, which Bridget next door to where we're recording this.
Okay.
Wrote,
all right.
Which you may remember or otherwise.
Right,
but anyway.
She's in next week, hopefully, so I'll ask her.
I'll ask her, yeah. So those ads, I mean, I think what happened with that campaign was that, Kiwis loved them, first of all. I mean, they were absolutely hilarious. And at a deeper level, I think people looked at those characters and said, they're kind of lovable losers, And
sums us up, really.
It does.
Apart from the lovable bit.
And I think that really struck a chord with New Zealanders that, they had massive talkability if you go to the golf clubs and the pubs, people were literally talking about those adverts and striking up a conversation about Sky TV, and the advocates for Sky were using that advert and that campaign as a way to advocate for getting a Sky TV subscription. And I think we saw a massive growth in Sky TV off the back of those campaigns directly. Now, there were other things going on as well. Sky acquired a lot more content. We added channels and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, that campaign, those ads played a huge part in the growth of Sky TV. I'm absolutely convinced of that, which is something that doesn't happen so much nowadays. There's very few ads out there that have that kind of level of talkability. But yes, getting back to your original point, I do remember those the pitch very well, because I shat myself laughing at the scripts, which was the
Technical marketing term.
Which was the test of whether we get a great campaign or not. You can't fool yourself. I guess you can fool yourself. You shouldn't fool yourself about what's truly humorous. And we used to have this phrase: "If we're going to do humor, can it please be funny?" Because so many, particularly radio ads, are so fucking lame. The humor is terrible, and so those ads were, and that whole campaign was hilarious.
Well, I think we thought so. But in terms of if we're going to do comedy, can it please be funny?
Yeah.
I want to do practically, unless you're talking about serious subjects, every ad should be funny. No one ever complained that they didn't like an ad because it was too funny.
No, that's true. I think one of the problems, if I can advise your industry, one of the areas you're hamstrung on is if you think about how creativity generally has changed in the last 40 years. I know you're a big fan of Afterlife.
Yes. Ricky Gervais show.
That theme, the language you use. There's jokes about paedophilia. The C-bombs dropped every.
Yeah.
TV has moved massively in the last 40 years. Cinema's moved massively, and yet advertising is restrained by these crazy rules about what's allowed. And so you can't do cutting edge humor in New Zealand in advertising. So it tends to end up being a bit kind of safe, in my view. Anyway, that's kind of, and also that's not the fault of the creatives. That's the restriction put on you by the advertising standards people. And sorry, to finish that point, it's kind of mad. You could be watching a TV show that's full of very adult themes, and then you go to the ad break, and if you show someone drinking a beer, you get reported to the advertising. It just seems madness to me that there's not more. Less restrictions on what you guys can do creatively from a humour perspective.
I remember shooting the third end in that Sky series. We actually shot in Sydney. Don't tell anyone. But we were in a pub, and we had people drinking in a pub, and we couldn't have anything that looked like beer in their glasses, even though it was a wide shot, and no one would ever notice it. It had to be a clear liquid or what could pass as Coke, which is probably more harmful than beer.
Yeah. So I'm just contrasting advertising, and I mean, God knows, not all clients want to have cutting edge kind of humor, but there's no opportunity for you to do that stuff, particularly on television. So it's no wonder that people end up doing heavily retail, short term stuff, whether they do humor or not. But there's such creative restrictions on what you can do compared to other creative industries, I guess is the point I'm making.
Yes. Now, for me, comedy is a very, very tricky beast. And Bill Bernbach, I think, said it's a film an ad can be great or rubbish depending on who it rubs up against. And I think that we were lucky in that respect. If we accept that those ads were funny, and maybe people out there who disagree, they can.
I never met anybody disagree with those ads being funny. In fact, I met one person
who said they weren't funny, and he was the CEO of Sky.
No, he liked those ones. No, a colleague of mine said, "Oh, those two buffoons running around, you're dragging the brand down," and But I think that was
there's always one.
Yeah,
there's always one. But there was, to my mind, they were hopefully they were quite good scripts. But they had a marketing director who went, "Those are funny. Let's make them." Not, let's change this a bit and let's change that a bit. And could this happen? And could that happen? And do they have to go into a motel? And or aren't you implying that there's homosexuality going on? And there's a million reasons that it could have been made harder.
Yes.
But you had a supportive client with a sense of humour. I've done ads before in the UK that have, with Ricky Gervais, that have won on radio, won a number of awards, bigger, I'm not going to go into the ins and outs, but have been well regarded as highly funny ads. And the client didn't want to run it and said, "That's not funny. It's just irritating."
Yeah.
So you need somebody to give the green light with a sense of humour that is aligned. We also had, as a director, Paul Middleditch.
Yeah.
Who said to me at the time, I thought he was blowing smoke up my arse, as a technical phrase again goes. He said that those Sky ads opened the doors to him in the States. He'd go around to see people in the US and they loved them.
Yeah, right.
They thought, and he said that kickstarted his career. He got a number of great jobs, went on to win Cannes Golds and whatever, and is still one of the funniest directors in Australasia, I think.
Yeah.
One of the most irritating people I know, Middleditch.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because, I think that does come back to the fact that there were really, a small team working on that. And, for my part, I try to be a little bit brave in terms of approving the idea. And I think the fact, I'll acknowledge my boss at the time who just let me get on with it,
Can we name him?
John Follett, who just let me get on with it. And, he really didn't involve himself in the creative side. He's like, what some CEOs do. And I think
pretty good. Did he have a sense of humour?
Great sense of humour, very dry sense of humour. And I think a lot of marketing directors who would have been in a similar position to me are always conscious about what the board think and what the CEO thinks and what the CEO's wife thinks. And will it go well in Australia? And, all that kind of stuff, which is a very limiting, diluting kind of influence. And if you're worried about, as we discussed previously, you have enough restrictions already, and then you start adding in all these layers of accountability, you end up with a diluted idea. And I think you can see that in executions on TV all the time, even now, now, even more now.
For sure.
That you end up with an idea that probably started out as quite funny and has been amended to the point of being, completely vanilla.
Yeah, well, to me, it gets a bit like a Rubik's Cube. You can start with a perfectly six-sided, equal coloured, and then, can we just change this square, and can we just change that square, and and each square that you changes something else, and you end up with a mess that everybody signs off.
So but having said all that, I wasn't brave enough to do the ad that I mentioned before that Bridget wrote, which basically involved Mark and Marty, the big guy and the little guy, trying to watch Sky TV, trying to find somewhere to watch Sky TV. And they'd been in the motel, been in the pub, they'd looked through someone's window, remember the girl's bedroom they were looking through to try and watch the rugby and all that kind of stuff. The last place we tried was a nursing home, where they saw a TV in this old guy's bedroom. So they kind of went in through reception, bluffed their way in, saw the TV, and then realized the power wasn't on. So unplugged something and plugged in the TV, started watching the rugby. They'd actually unplugged the guy's life support machine. So he was kind of flailing his arms around, and the big guy says, "That's it, Granddad." Enjoying the rugby.
That's it, Granddad.
That's it, Granddad. Enjoy the rugby. That one was too far for me. I thought that was probably going to go.
Well, I think it would have been. I think it would have been funny.
It would have been funny.
When you think, the other one that I know Gavin Siakamoto and Yul James really wanted to do was the penguin. Remember the penguin?
Yeah, the penguin one. Yeah, yeah. Where they throw the penguin off the
Go,
thing and
fly
it can
away,
fly,
little
yeah.
bird. It just goes splat.
Yeah. Probably my my lack of understanding that penguins don't actually fly was probably
It was, yeah, I think that was holding back. What was, I think what was, you had a great sense of confidence, Mike, and you didn't get flustered. I'll go into a couple of things where you might have thought of getting flustered. One was when the big guy had sex with a gorilla. It
yes.
was off camera, but
Yeah.
they had sex with, and people wrote in complaining about Sky showing bestiality in their
That's right.
TV ads, and you kind of went, whatever, if no one's complaining, then
If no one's complaining, then you're not. I'll quote Bernbach now. If your advertising goes unnoticed, everything else is academic. And so, I mean, that was suggested, that humor as well, completely defendable. You better explain the script, Paul. They were in the jungle trying
in
to
the jungle just off Bethel's Beach.
just off Bethel's Beach, representing the Ecuadorian jungle, looking for gorillas.
Congolese jungle, I think.
Congolese jungle,
Yeah.
right?
And a gorilla came up. The gorilla had problems. It was a female gorilla. It had problems with her mate because the gorilla's penis is actually, it's a medical term, so we can say that it's actually very small. And I came across Mark Neuer, who was the big guy, who is a big guy, and the gorilla quite fancied him because she thought he might be better hung than her partner, and dragged him off into a bush.
And I think the advert was around the fact that if you don't have Sky, you couldn't understand. You're missing out on all the great stuff on the Discovery Channel. I think was where we were kind of going with that.
What, there was a point to that ad.
I think there was a point to that.
It was gratuitous gorilla sex.
Yeah.
And the other one was when I'm guessing you remember this, was when we shot an ad, and I had to come into you cap in hand and say, and it was set in a police station.
I do remember that.
Set in a police station, and it had Mark and Marty being
I thought it was a Cadbury's ad.
interviewed by a policeman, and then I suddenly realised after it had been shot that we'd shot an ad very similarly, like 2 months before, for Cadbury, that was set in a police station with two people being interviewed. It was one of those incredible moments. As a creative director, you're covering all the clients, and you've shot two ads that are hugely the same, and no one's noticed. And the one person who should have noticed above anyone is you. Because I went to Marty and I, and I said, yes, I said, Marty, we've got a slight issue here. And he went quite quiet for a bit. And he said, look, do you want me to speak to Mike? And I said, no, it's my fault. I'll go and speak to Mike.
I remember you arriving with the flowers.
And the chocolates.
Yeah, so I do remember that. At the end of the day, we ended up with you created a new ad where they were kind of, we filmed that one down in all these exotic locations by the poo ponds in Mangere. So we ended up with better ads, so it was fine. I think the other thing that we did well while we're on the subject of congratulating each other, was we actually made script changes constantly on the morning of the ad where they're doing the show home on the floor.
Yeah, on the floor.
We changed that script literally just before the cameras turned over, And I think that really speaks to the fact that it was you and
collaboration.
You and I collaborating, but also being prepared to kind of make the change required. Whereas a lot of clients and agencies would really struggle with that whole notion of how on earth you can't even change a word. If you work at, I won't mention other clients, but other clients I work with, it's got to go to Singapore, then it's got to go to London.
Yeah.
Even if you wanted to change a logo color, it's just madness.
Absolutely. I think that's a very important part of it. And it happened a number of times where we'd be on set. If you remember Eunuchs.
Yes.
Where the guys applied to be look after the girls in the master's harem in
that's right.
15th century
Babylon or somewhere.
Constantinople.
Right.
Yeah, Constantinople. And the last we were really struggling to get the last line out, and we were spitballing it, I think as the Americans say, on set, and then in the end we came out with just one question, which worked really well. And interestingly, I didn't realize it at the time, but looking at the way that they make Friends, when they make Friends, the sitcom that was hugely popular some time ago, when they made it, they would shoot it live in front of a studio audience, and if they weren't getting laughs at the key point, they would stop, and the actors and the director would talk to the audience, and they would actually try out live a number of different lines to see which one they preferred and which one got the best laugh.
Okay.
And I thought that was really interesting. Whereas it's all technical filmmaking now, and With Nail and I, which is one of my favourite British comedies from the 80s, I think. Great cult film, if you want to see it. Written by Bruce Robinson, who's an Australian. Written and directed, and with Richard E. Grant in it. And I remember them interviewing Richard E. Grant about the movie, and them saying, "Oh yeah, I bet there was how much ad-libbing went on," and he said not one syllable. The director would not let them change one thing. But I guess that was the director's vision, rather than a bunch of people sitting around the camera going, maybe it could be funnier.
Yeah, right.
And
what are you advocating for then? Your favourite movie or the way you make ads?
I'm just trying to make myself sound educated in the world of filmmaking. I'm not sure if it's succeeding. One more, we'll stop mutual patting on the back, and I'll step aside and just pat you on the back. One more, Lions.
Yes.
So this was kind of interesting. We'd been running this you'd been running this campaign for whatever 3 years or so, and it'd been doing really well. But somewhere in Yourself in the Sky organisation, when Mark and Marty, they're getting a bit tired, do they stretch into other areas? Maybe we should.
That was the chairman at the time.
Get rid of.
Who said, these two. I'm going to do an Aussie accent. These two bloody losers you got roaming around the place. I mean, what kind of message you're sending to people about? What about women? What about families?
Yeah.
A
dream client, the chairman. Yeah.
My wife's saying, look at it. It's not Peter McCourt, by the way. So we were forced to do something else, and I'll let you obviously to tell the story of the ad, but I literally flew under the radar with that because I knew Discovery Channel wouldn't like it because it's way too risque for them. Yeah. So at the time, I had this kind of communications blackout with all the channel providers because they'd agonize over where
fade.
Yeah, they'd agonize over where you place their logo in relation, and you'd have these endless conversations about that type of thing. Yeah. So the idea of trying to get a script approved by any of them was hopeless. So I literally said, as far as they're concerned, I don't exist. If they see the ad, this is prior to YouTube, so they had to be in New Zealand, and would literally pull the ad off TV when they were visiting us in New Zealand, so they didn't see it. So explain the ad.
Okay, so explain the ad. So we had Mark and the lovely Australian chairman went, got to get rid of those two losers.
Yes.
I think he actually meant you and me, Mike.
You probably did.
Get rid of Mark and Marty. We need to have a change of campaign. So we did one of the scripts which Gavin Sekimoto and Hugh James wrote, actually, it was two zebras. The original script was two zebras at home, and I said, and this was my great filmic knowledge, I'd shot an ad for Schweppes some years previously when I was in the UK. Well, that was in Florida, featuring every single animal known to man. And I knew what it was like shooting with animals. And I said, you can't shoot zebras because they're very skittish. They keep moving around. You're far better off with lions. And I know it sounds silly, but your lion will, give them a good antelope steak and they'll sit there quietly for hours without doing anything. So change it to lions, and we're going to run that ad.
The outtake of all time on that set. You're going to talk about that, aren't you?
Yeah, I was going to talk about that. So Josh Frizzell, I think, shot it.
He did.
We're in a studio in West Auckland. I can't remember where we got the lines from,
You got them from that lion man up in Northland.
Ah, the Lion Man, yeah.
He ended up.
Where else would you get a lion?
No, he had a wildlife park up there.
Yeah.
And then you had Mark Vetty come down as well. He's the animal training.
Yeah, he trains dogs, so,
So it's easy.
he'll be fine.
Easy leap for him to get to that. Yeah.
So we had a big cage with the set inside the cage.
Yeah.
And the lion is sitting on the sofa. The idea of the ad is that it's a suburban house where two lions live, and they're watching the Discovery Channel, and the male lion has just come. These all contain sex. I don't know. The male lion has just come back from his holiday in Africa. We went on his own, but Discovery Channel had filmed him in flagrante with another female lion, and this comes up on telly while they're watching it. Cue raucous laughter. But while we're shooting it, we needed a reaction from the male lion, who was sitting on the sofa, which was made to look like cloth, was actually made of plywood, sit on the sofa, and there was a lion tamer behind the sofa, and who would stick his head above and do what was required to get the lion to act. And at one point, Josh Frizzell, as a director, wasn't happy with the reaction we got from the lion, so he said, the great direction line, hit him harder. So the poor man stuck his head up above the sofa, smacked the lion on the arse, and it didn't eat him, but he wasn't happy.
He wasn't too far. He wasn't too far away from being eaten. The lion. We certainly got the reaction that we needed for the shot, but yeah, that would have been the outtake of.
It was fun. I wish we'd got that on camera. Hit him harder. One last thing about that series. So we filmed 3 or 4 ads, including the lion, which was the best one, which I think won maybe one ad of the year in New Zealand. I don't know. It people liked it, and we shot about 4 of them. And a year later, after they'd all run, we did some research, and we said, "What do you think of Sky's advertising?" And they went, "We love Sky advertising. That big guy and the little guy, they're brilliant, aren't they?"
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No one had even noticed that the campaign had changed, and it was, I think, important learning. So we went back to using Mark and Marty. 18 months after they'd been taken off, and nobody noticed that for a year and a half we've been doing something else.
Yeah, and I think that is very instructive, isn't it, in terms of character-led advertising and all that emotional connection that humans crave, and these likeable characters.
Can you imagine what would happen if ASB brought back Goldstein?
Yeah,
it would be interesting. Anyway, so
the key to that though, I think, is how you develop I don't know how you go about developing Goldstein into towards the end. Some of the scripts are getting a bit kind of tired, and I guess that's the key to longevity. And I was thinking about when you asked me to come and do this.
Yeah.
Some of the campaigns that are enduring.
I didn't ask him; he insisted. Yeah.
There's few campaigns in New Zealand now that have that kind of enduring nature. I mean, when I was a kid, we used to have the freaking Oxo family, and even in New Zealand 20 years ago, there was the Anchor family, all that kind of stuff. But you don't see any of those nowadays. I think that's because I don't know why. Maybe there's less investment in TV, and it's all gone digital.
Well, I think even before digital came in, I struggle to see it. It works so well. Now, Goldstein is arguably so. One issue we had with Sky, certainly in those days, was that you couldn't advertise on TVNZ. Is that right?
At times they would take us off. Yeah.
So it was mainly on TV3.
Yeah.
So they weren't seen as much as much as they could be. So if you take say Goldstein as the most New Zealanders' favourite ad of the last 15 years or so. Why hasn't it been repeated? People, not necessarily for ASB, though that is a question, but for others. And I many times over my life, when I was 3. No, over my what I laughingly refer to as a career, I've gone, hey, why don't we do? And there's a strange reluctance among clients to do long-standing, interesting.
where you develop the character and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that is strange, isn't it?
Because I think with Goldstein, I don't think the public got bored of Goldstein. I think you're right. The scripts were maybe, which is difficult, because when they started, I think it was like, hey, we're doing something new and you could do interesting stuff. And then towards the end, everyone's got a point of view. Everybody within the client organization and the agency organization, who none of whom probably started working on the campaign, has an idea of what made it successful and what they should do to make it funnier and how they should integrate the products and what was wrong with the ones before. And you end up with a mishmash.
Yeah.
Whereas I think for us with Mark and Marty, it was you, me, Pete Thompson.
That's right.
And that was it.
Yeah, so we're in violent agreement with each other that character-led advertising with longevity is a great thing. I can only imagine the reluctance is that unlike me, where I was in the same role for 18 years, I had a long tenure. Most marketing directors are 3 to 4 years, and they come in and do their thing and then move on to something else. And so there's probably a professional reluctance to go, that's Goldstein, that was Barbara Chapman's thing, and I don't want to be, that was 10 years ago, and we've moved on, and now with this and that. So I would imagine that's the main reason for the lack of longevity, the lack of character development, that it's, there's a lot of short-termism in marketing, in terms of just getting the numbers in, but also creatively, there is a lot of short-termism as well,
Yes, with new creative directors coming in, we'll come to that. But the other thing about Goldstein, I've heard clients and agency people, but clients mainly, refer to the Goldstein effect or the Goldstein problem, which is when he came off air after, I don't know, 10 years, whatever. It was a real problem because it was a real problem to replace him. But
nice problem to have.
You've had 10 years of fantastic, of being one of the most popular ads in New Zealand. Everyone is aware of, complete visibility. And if you decide to stop that, yes, it is going to be difficult, but don't look at the issue that you have then. Look at the 10 years of success that you've had. And to go, well, we're not going to start down that path because in 10 years' time we're going to have a problem is lunacy.
That is absolute lunacy. I mean, who on earth is saying that stuff? The idea that you're worried about making a campaign that's too successful because when you finish it, you won't know what to replace it with. That is utter madness.
I'm not naming names, Mike.
That is complete madness, isn't it? I mean, how on earth can you proceed on that basis? I think, given as we just discussed, that there are very few enduring campaigns nowadays, there is a fantastic opportunity for somebody to, do a Goldstein or an Anchor Family or whatever it might be that really connects with Kiwis,
You need the clients to go,
I want a 5-10 year plan to make this thing work, And I think that speaks to, TV advertising generally, which is, you got 30, 60 seconds to do something great. They cost a fortune to do something really, really good.
Oh, the door's open to the coffee. That's brilliant.
And
just for me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
There you go, Mike.
Oh, thank you.
I'll get.
And maybe it's just all a bit too rich in terms of the investment for. Oh yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Sorry, listeners. Quick coffee break.
Maybe it's just all a bit too rich for people
to. Actually, Mike, let's have a. I'll press. Take it right into my head and press.
You're listening to Truth and Soul.
Okay, Mike. As much fun as it was talking about the real glory days for Sky, we'll have to come on to the mundane, because that takes us up to about 2006.
Yes.
We've only got another 5 hours to go of the podcast. So. What are some of the highlights of the work that you've been involved in since I wandered off the scene?
I think the one that sticks in the mind most is the Rugby World Cup 2013 that was in New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
I think Gavin, who you mentioned already, wrote those.
Wasn't it 2011?
Yeah, could have been 2011.
Okay.
At the time, Sky TV subscriptions were plateauing a little. Maturing type of business.
This was the Sergeant Major.
The Sergeant Major,
Yeah.
the drill sergeant.
Drill
idea.
Sergeant, yeah.
And I was really keen. I mean, one thing that's interesting about TV subscriptions, and I guess most subscriptions, that there's consumers tend to wait to the very, very last minute to get a subscription. So they see all the activity, and they know what their lives are going to be like at the time. You know, if you're going 6 months out, ask them to make a decision about something that's happening in 3 months is difficult. So they tend to wait to the last minute to get a subscription. And so what I wanted to do was go very early with that campaign in order to try and reduce disconnects from the platform.
Yeah.
So the idea would be Sky's got the Rugby World Cup in 2011. Let's start that advertising 2010. So trying to keep a campaign going for that long was difficult, particularly if you're just going to use kind of footage. And if you look at the Spark stuff now for this Rugby World Cup, it's basically footage. I mean, it's perfectly solid work, in terms of retail execution. You can have a point of view on that, Paul?
The word people probably like your Australian chairman who have gone, well, Sky, it's all about the programmes, show footage of this, footage of that, footage. And there are promos. And if you look at, I know if you watch American sport, but I watch ESPN a lot for the NFL. And the breaks are just footage, and there's you tire of that so quickly.
It's wallpaper, right?
Yeah.
Now, Spark have an advantage in that it's new for them, so people aren't new to the idea of Spark having sport, so that's probably enough to get them going. But anyway, as you say, Sky has huge, endless amounts of content, and doing a edit with a rock track and a logo at the end does tire. And so we definitely didn't want to do that, particularly for a long spell. And so again, we wanted a character-led campaign. And so when I think back to that campaign, there were like 5 or 6 executions that were all very funny, all driven around the idea that Sky had to step up in terms of production to take on the Rugby World Cup, because Sky was not only broadcasting the tournament, Sky was also the host broadcaster. So we were doing the world feed. So there's always that kind of Kiwi on the global stage thing. So the idea that we would run for a year out from the tournament itself.
2010.
Thank you. Was in the brief, and the idea of this drill sergeant coming over and training the troops had longevity.
Yeah.
And I think that was the favorite ad we've run that was commercially and creatively successful. My favorite ad we ever did.
Sorry, just on that point, Mike, because I think I've very arrogantly on our behalf omitted some very important other characters in this progress who carried on long after I'd gone. Rose.
Yes.
Melissa.
Yes.
Faye. Judy Thompson. Who producers, suits, and media. So they, all of those people worked a long time.
They certainly did.
At Sky.
They certainly did.
And I know that certainly Melissa and Faye will stab me if I don't mention them. So, hi guys.
Completely. I mean, there's when we've talked about there being less layers and less people involved, let's not confuse that with me and you
turning
up with a cine room.
What's the idea, Mike? I like that.
Yeah, I like that. That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be completely ridiculous. So, a huge army of people doing stuff. And by the way, as the client, a lot of that stuff is done, back at house. Yeah. And so they turn up in my office with a smile on their face.
Yeah.
And ask me if I want a coffee, and I don't see all the pain that people like Faye and Melissa and the others and Rose, went through to execute these things. There's a massive amount of work goes into to making great work. So absolutely.
So thanks, guys. And it's funny that Gavin Sekimoto keeps coming up as being involved in it.
Well, you know a lot more than I would, but I mean, Gavin's a fantastic creator, very unassuming kind of character.
He's loud, brash, outspoken. Yeah, very, very quiet guy, but surprisingly quite funny. Surprised me.
Very funny.
Yeah.
So that would be my favourite in terms of high profile and
Shot by Tim Bullock.
commercially successful. Shot by
Tim Bullock.
Yeah. I think the funniest ad we did, maybe this was under your tenure or not, picking up on my boss's remit of don't involve me in anything. I took it upon myself to working with Travis Dunbar, who was our programming guy. We were worried about the buy rates for our adult content that we had. And so we did a campaign called Think Fresh, which I think is still on YouTube somewhere. It is the funniest ad. It basically is full of double entendres out of the adult film industry. I think... I
don't remember. Was it possibly Bridget?
I think it was Bridget who wrote it, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was...
So she went to Urban Dictionary and looked up every possible sexual deviation.
I don't think Bridget had to go to Urban Dictionary.
And put it into
just asked around the department.
Put it into a film that said there were kind of beef curtains and choking the chicken and up the dirt track. And
how did the board take to that?
Well, luckily it was defendable in that they were double entendres. So
yeah,
you needed to have a dirty mind in order to get the joke.
Yeah.
So my boss wasn't too pleased with it actually because
John Follett.
No.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think he was probably right. Sky at the time was New Zealand's biggest pornographer.
Yes.
In terms of selling adult stuff.
Talking of that,
I'll just finish that point quickly.
Okay.
And we were kind of flying under the radar, and I'm mixing my metaphors, but putting our head above the parapet was likely to get shot off. So he wasn't too pleased I was advertising it at all. Yeah. So I was trying to improve buy rates, but it was a good example of a real disconnect between what the boss wanted, what I wanted, and what my colleague wanted. And,
Yeah, well, this is the ad's a bit dirty, Mike, but we're advertising the porn channel.
Hard not to... We had Toby Talbot...
Who?
Yeah. We had a...
Joking, Toby.
This time I did get approval for it, and we ran another ad for the adult stuff that was... they're also very good. Which involved a kind of porno producer casting for...
I've seen that on
video.
Yeah,
very funny. Oh, Mr. Darcy.
So I think we ought to talk about another, while we're talking about pornography, which it seems to be, another string to your bow was that while you were marketing director of Sky, it was your job to choose the level of deviancy that was allowed to appear on the Sky porn channels.
Well, it was once. I mean, what happened was...
You gave that job up?
Well, somebody else decided it was we needed to be a bit more grown up about the whole thing.
Yeah.
And in the earlier years of Sky, there was a lot of blurring of responsibilities, and so somebody in the studio came to you with a list of sex acts, and the way the porno industry makes their films is they film it once.
Yeah, talk me through it. I've never seen one. So,
no.
Yeah.
They film it once and edit it 20 times, depending on the territory. So, if you're in a conservative country, it's heavily edited, so you just see not very much at all.
Yeah.
At the other end, it's all on.
What other end?
Literally at the other end, it's all on. And so my job was to go through a kind of tick sheet of various deviances and sexual acts and say what was allowed in the territory or not. So it was kind of kissing, yes. French kissing, yes. Ejaculation, I think so, yes, we'll say that. Something called pinkage, which I ticked. I wasn't entirely sure what it was. Shortly after that, we then got a chief censor in to watch every single porno.
That was Pete Thompson.
He would have been a great job for Pete Thompson. He wasn't. And he sat in a room in a booth for 8 hours a day watching.
I bet he did. And a box of Kleenex.
And a box of Kleenex.
Yeah. So you had to go back to your. What have you done at work today, Dad? Well,
exactly. Yeah. So I got that dubious honour at one time anyway to do it, and
because I seem to remember that somebody told me who'd watched these Sky channels. I obviously hadn't. That anal sex was allowed, if I can say that, Jonathan, but ejaculation wasn't. It seemed to me to be kind of curious.
I think you're probably right. Actually, you have a strangely encyclopedic knowledge of our of the services Sky had, Paul, I must say.
Well, I just remember thinking that was.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right. Yeah,
that's quite strange, and it said quite a lot about whoever was doing the censoring. Let's move on.
Possibly me.
Yes.
Before we move on, I did hear a story about Babbage coming to your house in Ponsonby, putting the porno channels on and putting it on full blast, so the whole of Ponsonby could hear groans and moans emanating from your living room.
That wasn't the Sky porno channel.
Okay.
No, one evening we were getting ready for Axis at my house, and I think Regan Grafton and Jewel James and Mike were and for some reason we had the Playboy channel, like the Sky Softport, on in the background, and then someone took a picture of Hugh, and it was hot, so the doors were open, and someone took a picture of Huel in his suit because he'd never worn a suit before, and in the background is the TV set with some various sexual acts going on, and then that picture eventually found its way to Facebook, whereupon his daughter saw it, who had some questions.
Look at this. The tape recorder. It's running.
Anyway, putting pornography behind us. What's your least favourite Sky ad you ever made?
Well, I mean, I guess there's a lot of ads we made that were so heavily retail. They're just acquisition ads, and they were practical, but I don't remember them with any particular fondness because they were just and we made a lot of those, because we don't have Sky doesn't have a retail presence, so they were kind of Harvey Norman-esque in their execution. So they would be my least favorite. In terms of more creative stuff,
things that because there's certainly, I'm not going to go into them because this is me trying to embarrass you, not the other way around. There's certainly in my life there's things career that I've gone, this is going to be brilliant, and it just hasn't worked out for whatever reason.
Yeah, maybe I'm in denial about them. I'm sure they exist. I can't think of any.
They were all wonderful.
Yeah. There's certainly ones I regret, that would cause me a lot of pain. Ones that didn't work out. I mean, I think the ones that didn't work out, we were quite quickly, the fallacy of
push them aside and forget about it.
It's not working, we'll just get them off. It's just,
So what about regret? Can we talk about the ones that this is great, or it's been a bit of a headache?
Well, I think the one, it wasn't a DDB ad. It was, we did a campaign with a draft FCB worked on.
Always a mistake.
Worked on Prime TV. Justin Moday was there at the time. So there is a DDB connection. And when Mad Men launched, and this is one of, by the way, interrupting myself, this is one of the problems for TV companies, is their products ever changing. It's not like Coca-Cola, where Coca-Cola's Coca-Cola, and you can execute.
Well, they took the cocaine out, but other than that,
apart from that, in 18, whatever it was. Yeah. But apart from that, it's the same products, so you don't have to worry about relaunching Coca-Cola too often. Whereas with Sky TV and TV companies generally, you're basically launching a new product every few months, and you've got zero awareness of every product. I can remember 3 examples. We used to nominate the cover of the Skywatch magazine, which is the guide for Sky customers.
Does it still happen, Skywatch?
It's still going. Yeah, it's still going. It still makes a dollar. And Julie Blythe came to me and said, we want to put Downton Abbey on the cover. And I said, what the fuck's Downton Abbey? oh, it's this new thing coming out of Britain. It's going to be really big. I've heard all that before.
Yeah.
And we had a kind of stock shot of the entire staff. It was a shit cover if you didn't know what Downton Abbey was. Now it'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
So we had that challenge. Sky has that challenge every single time there's a new TV show coming out. It's a new product. You've got to market with zero awareness. And so when Mad Men came out, the concept, as we all know, is advertising agency in the 1960s. And it was on Prime. At the time, Prime TV, which is Sky's own free-to-air channel, Sky's free-to-air channel. It was a bit of a kind of Me Too kind of channel, because TV1 dominates, TV1 2 dominates, and TV3 is third place, and Prime is a distant fourth. So we want to do something interesting with that concept. And so Draft came up with a fantastic idea, which was to recreate an advertising agency in the style of a 1960s advertising agency.
I did that.
You
it's
did
called
that.
Bond Scatman and Friends.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah.
And so we ran some ads pretending we were launching this new this new advertising agency. Receptionist required, must be busty.
Yeah.
Creative director must be heterosexual or something like that,
And drink a lot. Yeah.
and drink a lot. So there was all these anachronistic type of, and then we ran one of the central themes of episode 1 of Mad Men was it was a non-Jewish agency, and they were desperate to get a Jewish client, and so we ran one ad about agency seeks clients, even Jewish clients, and I think we used the term even Jews, which was a pejorative term unless you're Jewish, in which case it's fine.
Yes. Yeah.
And that caused a horrible stink. People were terribly offended. I had the Simon Wiesenthal, Senator from New York, calling me. I was accused of being a Holocaust denier. I mean, and I completely understand, was educated around the fact that you can't, Jewish people are entitled to be offended by anything that even smacks of anything anti-Semitic. So it was certainly not designed to be anti-Semitic. I completely regret doing that campaign from start to finish, particularly the Jewish angle.
Yeah.
And it was the other point about it is I think this is an interesting point. The communication from Prime was so off kilter, that style of advertising was completely alien to what Prime TV stood for at the time.
Yeah. And
really we need to take the Prime TV brand on a bit of a journey to give us the platform to go with that type of advertising. It was like shock and awe, and it fell miserably. And the other point about it was, Mad Men on Prime, Mad Men is a cable TV type of play and not a ratings play. So it was a miserable campaign from start to finish. Even though creatively,
it was very interesting.
Very interesting, yeah. Which I think is an interesting lesson.
Did you tell Julie that she was right? That you should have put Downton Abbey on the cover? And
we also put Downton Abbey. There were two different stories. The general point about trying to break new TV shows is difficult. It's a lot easier nowadays because you tend to get a bit of a groundswell in social media and the like, whereas in Downton Abbey Mad Men days, you launch from a zero. I'll give you an example. Game of Thrones is finished, but everyone's already talking about the sequel. So there's always
a sequel.
There's going to be an offshoot, of
there you go.
Spin-off of.
I didn't know, but
yeah, there you go. Everybody apart from you is talking about it.
But
all Game of Thrones fans are. That was actually the other campaign I really liked. We did a
Bring Down the King.
Bring Down the King. That was a great campaign. Interesting example, actually, of the dangers of chasing creative awards.
Good. Just quick recap for our listener. That
yes,
we should probably
because creatively a fantastic campaign. The idea was, and it had a digital element, a social element. So the guy set up a statue of the evil king Joffrey in the Aotea Square, and
in Westeros.
And the idea was called Bring Down the King, and then you would text a number.
Yeah.
Not text a number. You
text, and every time you said
something, Bring Down the King, The ratchet would tighten, and eventually it would bring things. So when we hit the number, the statue came down. Now, I got a standing ovation. I got a standing ovation at the HBO conference that I went to and showed that work. They were actually on their feet applauding me. Fantastic. It won awards left, right, and centre. You know, in terms of reach, it was actually tiny.
Yeah.
And so you got to be real careful in chasing the creative awards too much. And I do think your industry is obsessed with creative awards to the point of nausea from the client's perspective.
So my industry is not
your industry.
Our industry. Sorry, no, yeah. All right, my industry, not me. But
not you.
Our industry, yes. Well, did you notice that when you were running that campaign that
I did notice your pizza.
We had
hijacked the pizza.
So they were live streaming this. Sky were live streaming it, and there were only 4 people watching the live stream.
Yes.
But they're live streaming it, so we sent down. So there's cameras on it permanently. So we sent down a dwarf. I don't know. We got like an hour's notice. We managed to find a dwarf and gave him a placard that said "Bastards are people too." I think Hell Pizza. And he wandered around in front of the camera, and then the security guard came and took him out. Now, what was illegal about having someone walking around a public space with a placard? I don't know, but
I think I might have done a Monty Burns there. You know, remove that placard. That placard person.
Mike, thank you so much for coming in. It's been great to relive the
glory days.
Glory days when we were kings, when we were in our teens. Thank you so much for that. Folks at home, I hope you've enjoyed it. If you know any another client who would possibly provide some interesting content for us, let me know, and we'll send Mike on his way back to the golf course.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, mate.
You've been listening to Truth
and Soul,
the New Zealand Advertising Podcast.
Okay, list of credits. Thank you very much to this week's guest, whoever he, she, or it might be. If you liked it, drop us a line, paul@truthandsoul.co.nz. Thank you very much to everyone at Franklin Road, Jonathan, Cole, the Wastrel, Shane, Vanessa and Gracie. Otis, who did the logo, and Matt Stalker, who's going to play us out. Thank you.
On the Farewell Drive, we found 100 ways that our hands fit together. Centrifugal force pulls us apart as we spin. Please forgive my trembling hands, crudely silhouetted by the flickering spires of candlelight, while the wicked sleep sound, the anxious toss and turn. Thoughts come not as single spies, but in battalions, while the wicked sleep sound, the anxious toss and turn. And it's at times like these that we understand our Father's fascination with dendrology. The family tree is losing its leaves. Please forgive my trembling hands, crudely silhouetted by the flickering spires of candlelight, while the wicked sleep sound, the anxious toss and turn. Thoughts come not as single spies, but in battalions, while the wicked sleep sound, the anxious toss and turn.